fucking good. Every so often in media, whether it's games, books, movies, or television, something comes along that is so excellent, so utterly competent in every aspect of its construction that it transcends fandom boundaries and biases to become a bona fide cultural phenomenon. In much the same way that Game of Thrones took control of the TV landscape during the 4.5 seasons that it aired, discussion of Arcane is nearly impossible to get away from on the internet. It is simply that exceptional. But you probably already knew that Arcane was fantastic. You've either already watched the show, or if you're an intellectual who thinks for themselves, you didn't need to watch the show because you've watched 100 other YouTubers telling you that it's good. But today I want to talk about a specific scene in Arcane, even more specifically the fight between Ekko and Jinx. Now, Arcane has plenty of fight scenes, any one of which I could probably make a whole video about, and maybe I will, don't tempt me. But this scene in particular stands out to me as an absolute masterclass. I've rewatched this fight about 20 or 30 times, and each time, I swear to God, it gives me goosebumps. Which is odd, because compared to other fights in the show, it's definitely one of the shorter ones. However, as I keep telling girls on Tinder, it's not the length of the fight that counts, but how much narrative meat you can pack into it, and this scene is definitely on the girthier side. But without further ado, let's unwrap this scene to get at the juicy bits and find out what makes this fight so goddamn majestic. But to do that, we first have to take a look at something that everyone on the internet loves all the time. Context. Oh yeah, and this will require spoilers for a pretty big chunk of the season, so go watch Arcane if you haven't, please. It's very good, but then come back, there's a video going on. Let's start with Ekko. At first glance, it's a bit strange that given how popular of a character he is, he actually has relatively little screen time compared to the rest of the cast. Which is kind of expected, at least in the earlier episodes. The relationship between Vi and Powder is so integral to the overarching plot of the season that it's only natural that some characters would have to be sidelined for a bit to ensure that these two get the fleshing out that they need. But that doesn't mean Ekko gets no characterization in the early episodes. From his very first appearance, we can see him acting like a bit of a brat when Benzo tells him to leave the shop so he can talk with Vander. Once outside, he runs into Clagger, showing him some adorable fighting moves he says he learned from Vi, which very neatly establishes a relationship between himself and the Felony sisters. It's also revealed that he ripped off Jace when he came to Benzo's shop, and it was actually Ekko who provided the gang with the tip on Jace's apartment in the first place, showing us that even though he's just a kid, he knows how to play the game. Soon after that, we watch him run interference for Clagger as a pair of enforcers come strolling down the lanes, who he blatantly stares down with all the raw charisma of a Twitch streamer saying naughty words. After that scene, he shows off a bit of ingenuity by his way of eavesdropping on the conversation between Vander and the enforcers. This is definitely speedrunning character development, but it's also very efficient character development. Just from these brief scenes alone, we can tell that even for his age, Ekko is headstrong and stubborn. He's resourceful, quick-witted, and while he still has a genuine sense of childhood innocence, he's not naive to the state of the lanes, and he navigates trouble as it comes as best he can. I mean, the kid stared down a pair of steampunk Gestapo and didn't fucking blink. This kid is a straight-up gangster. I still would have loved to see more of him interacting with Vi and Powder. Keep it together, keep it together. But for the time he's given on screen, he is surprisingly well-defined. After certain events happened, the story jumps forward a few years, and we find out that Ekko has been running a gang known as the Firelights, and causing Silco's operation no shortage of headaches. When he reunites with Vi, while he still maintains the headstrong attitude that is central to his character, we see that he's actually matured quite a bit since the days he and Vi used to roam the streets as children. He reassures Vi that her absence over the years was just a cruel twist of fate, and that she can't blame herself for all the tragedies that have befallen their home. Flickers of that bright-eyed little boy whose smile stole our hearts still remain, but they are drowned out by the seemingly ironclad sense of responsibility and determination that practically pours out of every expression he makes. We even get a little glimpse as to the source of that determination, as he shows Vi a mural depicting all the people they've lost over the course of Silco tightening his grip around the Undercity. Rather than blocking out the pain of all the loss he and his friends have endured, he wields his grief like a weapon, using it to steel his resolve rather than letting it consume him like it has so many others. However, just because he's determined doesn't mean he's a complete idiot either. This show very clearly likes to play with tropes, and Ekko definitely echoes more than a few classic bullheaded shonen protagonists. However, he's still rational enough that when Caitlyn spells out exactly what will happen if they don't return the gemstone to the council, he recognizes that politically, this is the best chance they have for something even resembling peace between their two cities. Now, I know this video was about breaking down a specific fight scene, and we're getting to it, I promise, but recapping some of the elements surrounding and leading up to the fight is, in my opinion, crucial to understanding the significance and weight of the fight itself. And plus, Arcane is just filled with all these little details that are really hard not to spin off into tangents about. Like look at this mural. What a beautiful little piece of symbolism, and it's a nice opportunity for the viewer as well to have their own little goodbye for all these characters whose lives have been cut short by all the senseless violence. Like, you watch the scene and it's like, oh shit, dude, there's Clagger, and then there's Benzo, and this guy, and Vander, and... we have to talk about Powder. From a purely narrative standpoint, I think Powder is one of the most complex and interesting characters in the entire show. Her journey from well-meaning but perpetually unlucky child to a killer with a tenuous grip on sanity at best is one of the most compelling arcs I've seen in a long time. Powder's mental state is a melting pot of conflicting emotional torments and traumatic events that slowly works its way to a boil over the course of the season. When she's not wrestling with the self-hatred and guilt she feels for inadvertently killing most of the people she meant to save in episode 3, she's struggling to reconcile her perception of the sister who was supposed to love and protect her with the one who abandoned her, cursing her as a Jinx. As viewers, we can recognize the sheer tragedy of what occurred in episode 3 and desperately hope that Vi can somehow break through to her. But to Powder, even when she finally reunites with Vi after years apart, she still can't trust that this reunion is anything more than a facade meant to ensure that there's no part of her soul left unscarred. She is constantly pulled between Silco adamantly telling her that everyone will betray her except for him, even as Silco appears to hide the fact that Vi is still alive from her in an attempt to keep her securely under his wing. Throw in the fact that Vi is confirmed to be traveling with an enforcer, the people who first attacked their home all those years ago and are hunting down citizens of the Undercity to this day, and you have a recipe for a good old-fashioned psychotic breakdown. I could talk for hours about the subtle nuances and masterful character building shown over the course of Jinx's transformation, but we'd be here all day. I don't even know whether to call her Jinx or Powder half the time, which can be a sign the writers have fucked up somehow, but in this context, I think it's a testament to how conflicted and layered they've made her as a character. In the events leading up to the fight against Ekko, which I swear to God, we are getting to, just stay with me. Silco manages to bring Jinx back around to his way of thinking for the time being at least, and impresses upon her the importance of obtaining the gemstone. Meanwhile, Ekko, Vi, and Caitlyn are setting off towards Piltover. They make their way onto the bridge leading into the city when they're suddenly stopped by Marcus and his squad of enforcers. Upon seeing the gemstone, Marcus suddenly remembers that he's a cop and shoots Ekko out of professional obligation. Vi realizes that shit has gone tits up and runs back to save her love interest. Seeing her sister fall victim to the homosexual agenda makes Jinx very angry, and she prepares to join the action as well. Suddenly, a swarm of firelights descends upon the bridge, creating some very nice mood lighting as Marcus struggles to hold another officer accountable for their conduct. And then... amid the carnage, Jinx slowly makes her way onto the bridge, and I do mean Jinx this time because, for the moment at least, Powder is simply not present. She callously executes one of the surviving enforcers, not even looking at him as she pulls the trigger. Marcus exits the scene to serve his administrative leave in hell as Jinx retrieves the gemstone, slowly advancing upon a wounded Caitlyn, assisted by Vi. And it's here where Jinx snaps, open firing upon the two of them, but just in the nick of time, Ekko, who proves that an ounce of Kevlar is worth a pound of field dressing, emerges on his hoverboard, feinting a blow on Jinx in order to snag the gemstone back. He hurls the stone at Vi, shouting at them to run away, and, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the headliner for tonight's festivities: Ekko versus Jinx. Now, It's time to get analytical. The fight begins slowly at first. Ekko smirks slightly at Jinx before producing a pocket watch, which he gently swings back and forth. At first glance, Jinx looks slightly taken aback, then an identical smirk crosses her face as well, but it's more than just mere amusement, it's familiarity, and we're about to find out exactly how familiar as Ekko literally turns the clock back on Jinx. Suddenly, it's Powder standing in her place. The camera pans back to Ekko, also suddenly reverted back to a child, and it all becomes clear. This fight that the two of them are about to engage in has already happened before. Then, the beat drops. If it wasn't already clear, this is a flashback, partially signaled as well by the gorgeous transition and visual presentation. We're watching a simple game being played by two children, with Ekko attempting to get in range of Powder before she's able to mark him with her paint gun. However, you'll also notice the scene flickers back and forth between the characters' adult and child counterparts, hammering home the parallel between the innocent game they played as kids and the life or death struggle happening in present day. As Ekko charges Jinx, you'll also see some pretty poignant visual symbolism happening in the background. Ekko is flanked by a firelight, emphasizing not only his deep connection to the Undercity and its inhabitants, but also his status as leader of the Firelight's gang, one of the only organized forces willing to stand up for the common people of Zaun and against Silco. While Jinx has somewhat corrupted and bastardized the image of the Firelight after her devastating attack on the bridge just moments ago, this framing of Ekko against one of the most iconic symbols of the Undercity represents his standing in both the story and the world at large. Ekko is the purest representation of the spirit of Zaun, and he is the hero the city both needs and deserves. Jinx, on the other hand, is represented by a dark raven. Some people have theorized that this is a nod to Swain's eventual involvement in the story, but I really think it's much simpler than that. Ravens have often been used as a symbol in literature and media for death and the pain of loss. The appearance of a raven in a story is often meant to herald some sort of tragedy, and I don't think I need to explain why that's relevant to Jinx. As the fight continues, Ekko ducks under Jinx's first shot, showing that even as a child, he was gifted with natural agility as well as some decent situational awareness and foresight. Our next shot shows an adult Ekko, further accentuating his athletic abilities with a mid-air horizontal spin as he leaps over the next shot. However, what's brilliant about this shot right here is that it isn't actually happening, not yet at least. What we are seeing here is a young Ekko's imagination of what he wants to do to dodge the next incoming shot. He's visualizing the idea of the capable, unflinching warrior that he will eventually become. Unfortunately, as a child, he doesn't quite possess the physical capabilities necessary to pull the move off. He leaps forward directly into the path of Powder's next shot, and just like that, Powder has won, as Ekko hurls the pocket watch to the ground in frustration. But then... Now, let me just impress upon you how fucking amazing this small segment actually is. Firstly, the director somehow manages to turn a shot sequence depicting going back in time as a transition from a flashback to the present day. That's just... oh my God, it's beyond words how cool and interesting that is. But on top of that, the way the scene is presented is also a slight nod to Ekko's in-game lore as well. Now, this could potentially spoil future Arcane plot points, so if you don't want to know anything about the game the show is based on, which honestly might be healthier for you in the long run, click here and we'll continue our scheduled programming. In League of Legends, Ekko is known as the boy who shattered time. He utilizes a device called the Z Drive to go back in time to navigate his way through encounters with the prior knowledge of how events will transpire, which is pretty much exactly what happens here. This entire flashback sequence is Ekko reliving a series of events before returning to the present, armed with the knowledge that will allow him to emerge victorious. This whole scene is a brilliant way of conveying exactly how Ekko will end up winning this fight, a nice little Easter egg for those with prior knowledge of Ekko's lore, and it's all delivered in a stunning visual metaphor that requires no words at all to communicate it to the audience. It's just... mwah. Chef's kiss. I wrote chef's kiss in the script and also just did the chef's kiss because I couldn't decide which one would be better for the, leave a comment if you think this ruined the video. Thank you. But now we return to the present day, and the fight begins in earnest. Ekko charges Jinx, ducking under the first shot, then leaps over the next two, finally becoming the fighter he always envisioned himself becoming. Jinx readies her next shot, but it's already too late, as Ekko ends the fight with one decisive blow. Compared to the previous sequence, this part of the fight is blindingly fast, but that's by design. If you were paying attention during the flashback, you as the viewer will already know that to Ekko, the actual fight is nothing more than a formality. Even the music stops, because as far as the outcome of the fight, there's no real tension or ambiguity left to be emphasized. In reality, Jinx never even stood a chance. But as Ekko kneels over Jinx, ready to put an end to the monster that brings suffering and death wherever it goes, he freezes. And in that moment, he realizes that he's been a fool. This monster, this frightened, timid little girl, is Powder. Even after everything she's done, after all his insistence to Vi that Powder died a long time ago, that she's beyond saving, that Jinx is all that remains of the sweet little girl he grew up with, even after all that, he can't bring himself to do it. In that moment, all he can see is the friend he thought he lost forever. All he can see is Powder. Then a grenade goes off. Okay, I know it's probably bad taste to make that joke twice, but come on, that was funny. Even though the fight is over, there's one last thing I want to draw attention to. I've only seen a few people actually bring this up, but in the early scenes of Arcane showing Powder as a child, take a look at the color of her eyes. They're a dull, muted shade of gray. However, as she slowly gives herself over to the persona of Jinx, you'll see that her eyes slowly begin to turn a sharp, focused hue of blue. But as Ekko kneels over her, ready to deliver a final blow to end the fight once and for all, look at her eyes. They're gray. This, at least for the moment, is Powder through and through. Which makes it all the more interesting, because if that is the case, Powder, not Jinx, is the one who pulls the pin on the grenade. I truly don't think this was an attempt to pull a dirty trick and finish off Ekko when he least expected it. I think this was Powder trying to end her own life. After experiencing several lifetimes worth of suffering in just a few short years, I think Powder is tired, and after coming face to face with another ghost from her past, kneeling over her in the position of yet another friend who wants to be her enemy, she finally breaks. Because when all you're surrounded by is people who hate you, want you locked up or dead, and curse your very existence, eventually, one of them is likely to succeed. So why give them the satisfaction? Well, guys and gals, if you made it all the way to the end of this video, then thank you. You didn't have to do that, but you did, and I'm very proud of you. If you enjoyed whatever this was, that whole like, comment, subscribe thing some of you guys like to do would be very much appreciated. I've got a couple other Arcane videos I'd like to do in the future, and a Don't Look Up video currently in the works, so if any of that interests you, go ahead and hit that subscribe button to get notified when all of that goes up. Or you can follow me on Twitter at DonnieBlue13 if you want to watch a mental breakdown happen in real time. Other than that, I would just like to say thank you again for watching, and hopefully I'll see you next time. I'm gonna go pass out. You guys have fun. Later.